On Saturday, May 3rd, I went to the 51st Annual Renaissance Pleasure Fair in Irwindale. I chose this intercultural experience because I had been there before in the 3rd grade and I had a horrible time and told myself that I would never go back. But since I decided I'd pick somewhere that I would be very uncomfortable in, I figured this would be the best opportunity to try it out again. Immediately when I drove up to the Renaissance Fair, I saw people dressed up in the Renaissance attire, and I actually did laugh at what they were wearing, which I feel slightly guilty for now. When I first walked in, I immediately sat down at the first show that I found, which was an improv group by the name of No Parchment Needed. They weren't that funny, unfortunately, at least that show, and they didn't deal with anything to do with the Renaissance. It was all contemporary topics, but I guess that's the fault of the audience, which gave them the topics. I also saw the Belles of Bedlam, and in my opinion, they were the funniest group. They were a group of girls that had just crude jokes about sex and even their grandma. I also saw Sportive Tricks, which had the same type crude jokes, but they did it in the form of an opera, which was interesting. Next, I had seen the Dreadwood Crew of Oddwood, which was a band, and I was really surprised by how talented they were. I actually really enjoyed their music. They also had really funny album names like Heavy Mahogany, a play off of heavy metal, which I got a kick out of. Then the next show I saw was the Dead Bob Show, which was also pretty funny, but it was targeted more at children and parents, it seemed like, but I was still able to relate to the topics pretty well. I found it kind of funny. One thing that surprised me about the Renaissance Fair was that it seemed really commercialized. I was constantly being harassed by the shops and the vendors. The people that I saw there kind of seemed to keep to themselves if they were in the proper attire, and they would only talk to each other. At least that's what it seemed like for me. It might have been a lot different if I had actually dressed, and I kind of regret not doing that because I feel like I would have gotten a lot more out of it. I also didn't bring anybody else with me, just in case it would keep me from interacting with the people there, but in hindsight, that probably wasn't such a good idea because I would have been more confident. There was definitely a lack of a taboo around the female form. If a woman was confident with her body, she was not shy and she readily showed it off. There was also a fantasy identity, which was expected. The attire, the sword fighting, the jargon, huzzah. I don't know how many times I heard the word huzzah. That must be the most favorite word of everybody there that was dressed in the Renaissance attire. The sword fighting, I was guilty of a stereotype there because I was expecting them to be like really nerdy guys, which they weren't. If I had seen them out on the street in their street clothes, I would have no idea that they had been part of this culture. And I did feel guilty about that. When I was at the Dead Bob show, I also experienced something which I did not expect. On May 3rd, it was actually May Day and Gay Day. So I kind of hit the intercultural jackpot there and got two cultures in one. And while I was at the Dead Bob show, a young kid asked his dad about a gay couple, and I felt he handled the situation very well. If I'd learned anything while I was there, it's that I can't use the stereotypes about that culture that I have been using. The people that I met were really nice, and they didn't fit any of the stereotypes that I even had. They were normal people, and I would not have been able to distinguish them apart from being at the event. Also, it didn't seem that authentic. Because of the commercial atmosphere that I felt it was in, I didn't feel like it was as authentic as it had been when I had gone there before. It wasn't the best experience I've ever had. I probably wouldn't go there again on my own unless I got dragged along by another person that really wanted to go. But I had a good attitude and I had a good time. So It wasn't fun, but I had a good time.